Most of the people raising their hand are from Clark College, which is where we're from. So if you could excuse the cameras, apparently this is one of the biggest things to happen to Clark College in years, presenting to this room.
Here.
Okay. Alright, I think we'll get started. This looks pretty full. Alright, so I'm Trey. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Independent at Clark College.
I'm Steven. I'm the news editor.
And I'm Diana. I'm the visuals editor.
Yeah, and we're going to do a presentation about polling, specifically online polling through Google Drive. And we're going to try and make this interactive. And so if you have any smartphones and access to Twitter, at some point we're going to ask you to get your phones out and answer a quick question. So, yeah. So, I'll reference this later on. If you could just, we're at Independent CC. We'll post a link to our poll up there. You don't have to follow it. In fact, I don't even recommend following us. We're very not active on Twitter. We need to improve that. But no, keep it. So last year we had this proposal come up where our student government was considering doing building a brand new rec center using student funds, and it was going to be a big deal. It would add like a $8 per credit student fee onto students' tuition to build this new center that most people voting wouldn't actually have an impact from. And we wanted to gauge how students felt about it, and so as a way of interacting with students and to support our story, we did a poll. And we did it with little slips of paper, and we had a bunch of people go out and do it. It was like 30 man hours and probably 100, 150 responses. And it was not very efficient, and we didn't really like the results that we got because of the comment section on the bottom, which we were really interested in using. People used one-word answers, two-word answers because they were using their pens, papers. We didn't get a great response. And so from there, we decided we wanted to do a poll on student cheating to see if we asked students if they've ever cheated, how they self-report. And we had more than triple the responses on the online poll, and we had far more comments and full sentences. Some people even gave us 100, 200 words in the comment section, and so it was just far more valuable than our written in-person poll.
Okay, so one of the first things to keep in mind when you're thinking about polling is what makes a good poll, because there's some stories that just don't work with polling. But there's kind of three categories of stories that we've found that work very well with polls. The first would be college policy, or basically potential policy changes. For instance, a while back, our college wanted to get feedback. They were asking administrators and people in the college body about potentially getting an armed police officer on campus because we don't have armed security of any type. And so we decided that we wanted to conduct a poll on this, and the results of that poll, it was a really popular poll, number one. It was a huge part of the story. Without that poll, our student perspective on the issue really wouldn't have been complete at all. And it even was taken back to college administrators and the college president and several faculty and staff at a college council meeting. They were all looking over the results and using it to make some of their decisions. So it played a huge role there. A second story area is stories about participation or student behavior. Our college tracks a lot of numbers related to class attendance and things, but there's certain things that aren't tracked. For instance, we've done polls on where students park, because a lot of students, like most colleges, have problems finding parking. So we're polling students on what parking lots they park in most commonly and how long it takes them to find parking spots. We also did polls on what percentage of students attended our sports games, which is very low. And then we've done background for editorial pieces. We've most recently there was an opinion piece that our opinion editor wrote on whether college instructors and professors should be presenting their political views in the classroom. And so we were able to poll student responses on that and tie that into the story. So those are really the three areas. But keeping this in mind, even if your story works well with the poll, there's some topics that are more popular than others. So for instance, tutoring versus guns. We did a story on our college changing up their tutoring program. And then there's the other story on armed police on campus. And the responses, this is the summary that Google gives you on how many responses. Responses for tutoring was about 200. Responses for guns was almost 360. So there's a huge difference there, and keep that in mind. Like what are controversial issues? What are topics that students are going to be likely to want to voice their opinions on? Those are things that you automatically want to be thinking, let's do a poll on that, because it can play a huge role in your story.
Okay, and also just to add on to that real quick, most colleges collect a lot of data on demographics and things. So if you think that your college might have the data, then don't do the poll. You know, you can contact we have our planning and effectiveness department has most of the information that we need, so we don't have to do polls. Polls are more about, you know, opinions, things like that. But so we do all of our polls through Google Drive. Not only is it easy, but we do all of our story editing through Google Drive. We're doing this presentation through Google Drive. So it's just really convenient for us to do. And we do it through the form tab over there. And this is kind of what a poll looks like. So if you can go there. And so we're going to go through a quick demonstration on how to do these polls. And so if you could just open up our Twitter real quick, we're going to be sending out a link there in a couple of seconds. I'll remind you again right before we send it out, but that's @IndependentCC. And the question that we are going to be doing a poll on today is puppies versus kittens. So keep that in mind. Okay.
So these are some tips for structuring questions. We could have gone over this when we created the poll, but we're going to try to keep it simple. Google Drive is pretty intuitive in how you use it, but these are some things to keep in mind. One of the most important things is to make sure you require the respondents to answer each question. When you create a question, there's a little checkbox at the bottom that says require this question be answered or something like that. And if you don't do that, then what a student can do is they get to that question, they can click. They don't have to answer. They can click through and continue the poll without answering it. But only 380 students responded to this one. So when you're trying to compare percentages across, compare numbers across different questions against the answers to different questions, it can be a little bit confusing. If you require each question to be answered, it eliminates that problem completely. Another tip is to create different destinations for different responses. Sometimes your poll isn't a yes or no, do you like kittens or do you like puppies? There might be several steps to it. For instance, we did a poll on tutoring just recently, and we weren't actually trying to figure out whether students had used tutoring or not, because our college had those numbers for us already. We wanted to know what they thought about tutoring and at what time point they used tutoring, because the tutoring program had changed. Another tip, Trey mentioned this when he was creating the poll, is to add a contact info section. Oftentimes you'll see a source that maybe doesn't provide a complete, doesn't provide an answer that's word for word usable in your story. In the response section, but you think, man, this could be a really good source. They say they have some credentials or some insight on the topic. Have a section there for them to put their email and name or phone number and follow up with them afterward. You can get some really good.
But make it optional, because some people don't want to give out their contact information. And you'd be surprised how many people actually give it just by giving the optional contact information. I would say like 40% of students give their contact information, email, and full name.
And then on the contact info section, I think we'll get to this later. You'll want to be creating basically a free response section where students can say whatever they want, and you can use those quotes in your story yourself. And then finally, don't forget about copy. Make sure your poll is free of spelling errors and grammar mistakes and all that. I know we've had a couple instances where it's not a story, so we create the poll and then we publish it, and it doesn't go through the typical section editing and copy and all that. And that can cause problems. So make sure you have at least a couple people look through your poll before it's published to ensure that it doesn't have any problems. But beyond just spelling and grammar, sometimes questions need to be worded better so that so that it's more fair, more balanced, or that students can have a better idea of what you're actually asking. So make sure you have several different eyes looking at your poll before you publish it.
All right, so make sure that you add a comment section. It is the easiest way to get content for your stories. I'm telling you, I thought that like 10% of students would give their input through comment sections. It is close to like 80%. Like every student wants to have their voice heard through the comment section, and sometimes I had one comment where they gave me 300 words in one comment for one poll. It's crazy how much they will give you. And this is an example kind of what we're talking about. It doesn't have to just say, do you have any comments, or this is very specific. Why haven't you attended a sporting event at Clark? And we got a bunch of answers on this one, and it was something like 7% of our students attended sporting events. We're a community college, so we kind of expected that, but and we got a wide range of answers on this. Yeah?
You're directly quoting from that in your stories?
Yeah, generally only if they provide their contact information there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any language in there that just says that we may quote you in a story that kind of lets them know that they're not just participating in a poll and that this is going to be seen, this could possibly end up in a story? I just wonder if there might be...
You know what? That would be a very good idea. Yes, that would be a very good idea. I think we've been under the impression that it's assumed because of, we've been doing the stories for a year and the quotes always end up in the stories, but I think that is a very good idea. In fact, I think we should be doing that. So that's a very good point to make.
Especially for a controversial thing.
Yes.
I didn't know, I thought they were just doing this in a poll.
Yes, exactly. Okay, that's a very good point. Make sure that they know that anything they are writing here is on the record and can be used in your story.
We always make the contact info section optional too. So we have a lot of anonymous responses. So oftentimes students, they don't want to put their name to it, but they'll post a response and leave off their name. So that's another way that we kind of look at it.
So, like I said, like 70% of students. And this is what a typical comment section looks like. When I say 70 to 80% of students use the comment section, a lot of them aren't usable. Look at this one. I am not interested in sports. Nothing interests me. Yeah, LOL. Like, you get a lot of, language that's not professional, and that's expected, but you'll find that some people really do take it seriously. I think surprisingly most people said no. I kind of thought students would be okay with it, but it turned out 62% were not okay with it. This was the one that he referenced that our Clark president actually used in a college council meeting to show the student's perspective. And what was interesting about this one was that the student perspective was actually a lot different than the faculty perspective on the issue. And so students were in favor of an armed security guard while most faculty was not. And that definitely surprised me. Okay, so, but you can, right, it has to be clear. Can someone tell me what this graphic right here is trying to show?